Elias Ward had learned long ago that quiet places were rarely peaceful. The silent moons at the edge of the galaxy always hid something broken, something forgotten. This one was called Kepri 9, a dust-covered rock that orbited a dying orange star. Official charts marked it as a resource processing outpost. Unofficial whispers called it something else. A graveyard for the unwanted. Elias stood at the edge of a rusted landing platform, watching cargo skimmers rise and fall like slow insects. The air smelled of metal, heat, and exhaustion. He adjusted the worn strap of his utility pack and reminded himself why he was here. Not for profit, not for glory. He had left those dreams behind years ago. He was here because someone had to be. The Galactic Concord claimed slavery was illegal. Every major power had signed the treaty centuries ago. But the truth was simple. Laws only mattered where someone was strong enough to enforce them. On frontier worlds like Kepri 9, enforcement never came. Elias moved through the settlement with practiced calm. He wore the plain clothes of a low-level trader, nothing that invited attention. His face was forgettable by design, his hair cut short, his movements careful. He had survived this long by not looking like a hero. The camp was large. Rows of barracks stretched across the dust, each one filled with workers pulled from dozens of species. They labored in silence, guarded by armored overseers with stun rifles and cold eyes. Large banners marked with the sigil of the Valor Imperium hung above the compound gates. That was the first sign something was wrong. The Valor were old, powerful. Their empire stretched across hundreds of systems. Officially, they did not allow slavery within their borders. If their symbol was here, it meant either corruption ran deep, or this place was never meant to be seen. Elias activated a small scanner hidden in his sleeve. It picked up biosigns, energy restraints, neural compliance implants. His jaw tightened. Confirmed. He followed the routine for hours. Watching, listening, counting guards, studying patrol paths. He saw workers collapse from exhaustion and dragged back to their feet. He saw food rations tossed like scraps. He saw fear that had settled so deeply into the people here that even hope seemed dangerous. Then he saw them. They were working near one of the refining pits, hauling mineral containers under the heat of the artificial sun lamps. At first glance, they looked like any other enslaved workers, thin, tired, dressed in gray labor wraps, but something about them stood out. They moved differently. Even while exhausted, their posture was controlled. Their steps were measured. When overseers weren't looking, they exchanged brief glances filled with meaning. Not panic, not submission, awareness. There were 6 of them, all the same species as the Valor guards, but younger. Their skin carried faint bioluminescent patterns, dulled by dirt and fatigue but unmistakable. Valor nobles often displayed brighter markings, symbols of lineage and status. Slaves never did. Elias watched closely. One of them, a tall girl with dim silver patterns along her neck, stumbled under the weight of a container. An overseer raised his weapon. Before it fired, another of the girls shifted position, subtly redistributing the load so the container balanced again. The stumble disappeared. The overseer lowered the weapon, bored. They had protected each other. Elias felt something cold settle in his chest. That night, he accessed the camp's outdated data node from his ship. The security was laughable by modern standards, likely because no one believed anyone would ever check. He searched for records tied to the Valor insignia. What he found made his blood run cold. The camp was unregistered. The workers were listed as lost transit assets. No families, no recovery claims, no follow-ups. It was a clean system for making people disappear. Elias leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. He could leave. He was not a soldier. He was not backed by any government. His ship was old, his crew small, his weapons outdated. But he remembered Earth. He remembered history lessons about chains, markets, and excuses, about people who said, "This is how things are," and walked away. Elias shut down the terminal and stood. By morning, he had a plan. It was not a good plan, it was not a safe plan, but it was possible. He began quietly spreading supplies among the weakest workers, food packs, water filters, med patches. He bribed one guard with credits and another with silence. He sabotaged a power relay near the eastern fence, timing it for a delayed overload. On the 3rd night, when the artificial lights flickered and alarms briefly howled, Elias moved. The fence dropped, not fully, just enough. He guided groups through the dust, sending them toward emergency beacons he had planted kilometers away. Old human tech, untraceable. They would attract neutral patrols eventually. Then he went back. The 6 Valor girls were in the medical barrack, tending to injured workers. When Elias appeared in the doorway, they froze. He raised his hands slowly. "I'm here to help," he said, keeping his voice calm. They stared at him with a mix of shock and disbelief. One stepped forward. Her eyes were sharp despite the exhaustion. "You are human," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." "You should leave," she said quietly. "Now, I'm not leaving without you." A heavy silence filled the room. "You do not understand what you are interfering with," another girl said. "I understand slavery," Elias replied. "That's enough." Alarms began to rise again, this time real. Shouts echoed across the camp. Boots pounded metal. Elias moved fast. He led them through a maintenance tunnel barely tall enough to stand. The girls followed without hesitation, helping each other despite injuries. They did not panic. They adapted. They reached the edge of the camp as searchlights swept the ground behind them. Blaster fire cracked the air, missing by meters. Elias opened the hidden hatch beneath his ship's landing strut. "Inside, now!" They climbed in. Elias sealed the hatch and sprinted for the cockpit. The ship roared to life as security vehicles closed in. A stun blast hit the hull. Another followed. Elias punched the thrusters. The ship lifted, engines screaming in protest. It cleared the atmosphere under heavy fire, shields flickering. Then the stars stretched, and the ship vanished into jump space. Silence followed. For a long time, no one spoke. The girls sat together in the cargo bay, breathing heavily. Some trembled now that the danger had passed. One wiped tears from her face, angry at herself for letting them fall. Elias entered slowly, lowering himself onto a crate. "You're safe," he said. "For now." The silver-marked girl looked at him. "You have committed a serious crime." He nodded. "I know. You have interfered in Valor internal matters." "I freed slaves." Her eyes hardened. "You took us." "I rescued you." A different girl spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "Do you know who we are?" Elias met her gaze. "No, and I don't care." That surprised them. She studied him carefully. "We are not laborers. We were hidden here deliberately." "From who?" "From our own empire." Elias felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. "Why?" They exchanged looks. Then the silver-marked girl spoke again. "Because we are threats." "To whom?" "To the throne." The words echoed in the metal bay. Elias exhaled slowly. "I don't need details. I just need to know one thing. Did you choose to be there?" The answer came instantly. "No." "Then you're staying with me until you decide what comes next." "You cannot protect us," one said. "I can try. You will be hunted." "I already am." The ship continued through jump space, unaware that behind them encrypted signals were racing toward the Valor core worlds. Priority alerts, silent commands. A single phrase repeated in classified channels. "Recover the assets, by any means necessary." Elias sat alone later in the cockpit, staring at the stars as they returned to normal space. He did not know who the girls truly were. He did not know what kind of enemy he had just made. But he knew one thing. Whatever the cost, he would not send them back in chains. And somewhere far away, a queen was about to learn that humanity did not ask permission to do the right thing. Elias did not sleep after the jump. He stayed in the cockpit, hands resting on the controls, eyes fixed on the slow drift of stars beyond the viewport. His ship, the Wayfarer, was old but stubborn, much like him. It had carried refugees, smugglers, and lost souls across systems that did not care if they lived or died. Now it carried something far more dangerous: the Valor girls. Behind him, the ship was quiet but not empty. He could sense their presence even without hearing them. They were not prisoners, yet they stayed together, careful, alert. People who had learned that safety could vanish in a breath. Elias finally stood and walked toward the cargo bay. The lights were dimmed, the hum of the engine steady. He found them sitting in a loose circle, sharing water and ration bars. Their movements were calm, but their eyes tracked him as he approached. "You should rest," the silver-marked girl said. Her voice was steady, but there was strain beneath it. "So should you," Elias replied. "But I doubt any of us will." She studied him. "You do not act like other traders. I'm not much of a trader anymore." "What are you then?" He thought about it. "Someone who couldn't look away." That answer seemed to satisfy her, though it did not ease the tension in the room. "My name is Elira," she said after a moment. "They will call me something else if they find me, but that is my name." He nodded. "I'm Elias." One of the others spoke, her voice softer. "You know what will happen now, Elias? The Imperium will not ignore this." "I figured." "They will claim you kidnapped us." "I figured that too." And they will be believed. Elias leaned against a crate. Truth doesn't always win fast, but it matters. Elira's eyes flickered with something like sadness. In our empire, truth is shaped to protect stability. Stability matters more than lives. Then your empire is wrong. That earned a sharp reaction. One of the girls stiffened, another looked away. Elira did not react at all. Yes, she said quietly, it is. Hours later, the Wayfarer received its first signal. It was a wideband transmission, powerful and clean, bearing the official seal of the Valar Imperium. Elias watched it flash on the console, feeling his pulse slow instead of quicken. Fear had burned out long ago. All that remained was clarity. He opened the channel. A tall Valar official appeared on the screen, clad in ceremonial armor that marked him as high-ranking. His bioluminescent markings glowed bright blue, a sign of authority. "Human vessel," the official said. "You are harboring stolen Imperial assets. Power down your engines and prepare for inspection." Elias leaned back in his chair. "No," the official's eyes narrowed. "You misunderstand, this is not a request." "I understand perfectly," Elias replied. "You're accusing me of theft. I'm telling you I rescued slaves." The word landed like a weapon. The official's expression hardened. "Those individuals are not slaves, they are wards of the state." "They were in chains," Elias said. "Worked until they collapsed. That's slavery where I come from." "You will return them," the official said. "Immediately?" Elias shook his head. "I won't." The channel cut. Seconds later, his sensors screamed. 3 Valar patrol ships dropped out of warp nearby, sleek and deadly. Their weapons powered up, locking onto the Wayfarer. Elias did not run. He couldn't outrun them anyway. He opened an internal channel. "We've got company." The girls arrived in the cockpit moments later. None of them panicked. Elira stepped beside him, her gaze steady as she took in the tactical display. "They found us quickly," one said. "They were always going to," Elias replied. The patrol leader hailed again. "This is your final warning." Elias opened the channel once more. "I'm invoking asylum." There was a pause. "Asylum is not recognized between your species and the Imperium," the Valar replied. "It is where I come from," Elias said. "And I'm not alone." As if on cue, another signal appeared, then another. Neutral transponders, independent ships. A small convoy emerged from warp, human, mixed species, old, mismatched. Friends. Elias smiled for the first time in days. The Valar ships hesitated. They were powerful, but attacking neutral vessels carried political consequences. Cameras and recorders were everywhere. Elira watched the screen, understanding dawning. "You planned this." "I hoped," Elias said. "I sent out a call the moment we jumped." "People like me listen for those." The patrol leader's voice returned, colder now. "You are escalating this situation." "Good," Elias replied. "So are you." The Valar ships withdrew just enough to signal restraint. The standoff stretched, tense and silent. Finally, the Imperium transmitted a formal notice, broadcast across multiple channels. The human Elias Ward was charged with kidnapping, piracy, and interference in sovereign affairs. The girls were declared missing persons under Imperial protection. Any vessel aiding them would be considered hostile. Elias shut off the display. "Well," he said softly, "that could have gone worse." Elira looked at him. "You understand what this means for you?" "I do. For your species." "I do. You will be pressured, isolated, punished." "Been there before," Elias said. "Humanity's good at surviving that." They traveled for days, moving through neutral space, changing routes, staying ahead of tracking sweeps. News spread faster than they could travel. The story was already shifting. Some outlets repeated the Imperium's claims without question. Others asked uncomfortable questions. Images leaked from Khepri 9, workers in chains, collapsed bodies, overseers with weapons raised. The Imperium denied everything. Elira watched the feeds quietly, her expression unreadable. One night she spoke again. "They are calling us unstable," she said. "Too dangerous to rule, too sympathetic to lesser species." Elias glanced at her. "Are they wrong?" She met his eyes. "No." That night she told him the truth. They were not just daughters of the Queen. They were heirs, educated, trained, and raised to understand the Empire from every level. They had seen the cracks, the lies, the cruelty that kept the Imperium strong. Some had spoken out. Others had refused to play their assigned roles. The Queen had not executed them. That would have raised questions. Instead, she had erased them, sent them to a place where they would vanish quietly. Elias listened without interrupting. "When we disappeared," Elira said. The Empire was told we died in a transport accident, mourning without investigation, clean. And now, Elias asked, now the lie is broken. Days later, they reached a neutral station governed by a coalition that valued appearances over justice. It was the safest place available. The moment they docked, officials arrived, polite, cold, afraid. They requested Elias surrender the girls for their own protection. He refused, they threatened sanctions. He shrugged, then something unexpected happened. Elira stepped forward. I will speak, she said. The officials froze, cameras activated. Elira stood tall, her markings glowing faintly. I am Elira of the Veiler, she said clearly. I was enslaved by my own empire. This human freed me. I request asylum under interstellar law. Gasps rippled through the room. You cannot, one official began. I can, Elira said, and I do. The feed went live across dozens of systems. Elias watched as the galaxy held its breath. Other voices joined hers, survivors from Kepri 9, records Elias had leaked, testimonies from worlds that had suffered quietly under Veiler rule. The Imperium responded with outrage and threats, but it was too late. The story was no longer theirs to control. Elias stood beside Elira as the station buzzed with chaos. You didn't have to do that. Yes, she said, I did. Far away, on a world of crystal towers and ancient power, a queen watched the broadcast in silence. Her hands clenched slowly. Humanity had not just freed slaves, it had exposed a throne, and the galaxy was beginning to pay attention. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Word of Elia's ward and the freed Veiler daughters spread faster than even the fastest courier ships. Every world that could receive a signal had already seen it. Humans and non-humans alike debated quietly, cautiously, about what had happened on Kepri 9. Some called Elias a hero, others a criminal, but everyone understood that something fundamental had shifted. Elias did not relax. He watched the stars from the bridge of the Wayfarer, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility. Elira sat across from him, her silver markings dim but still visible, reflecting the soft light of the control panels. She had not spoken much since their arrival at the neutral coalition station, but her eyes followed every movement, alert and thoughtful. They will come, she said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was low, almost measured, yet filled with certainty. Elias nodded. I know they already sent messages, threats, demands, warnings. They'll escalate soon. Not just the Veiler, she said. Other empires will watch closely. If they see weakness, humans will be tested. And you're not just Elia's ward to them anymore. You've become a symbol. He looked at her and felt a shiver. Symbols were dangerous. They made enemies faster than they made allies. I don't want to be a symbol. You already are, Elira said simply. You made the choice to act when others would have looked away. That choice cannot be erased. Elias did not reply. He preferred action to words, and right now action was required. The patrol reports were already arriving, small fleets being sent toward neutral sectors, diplomatic envoys carrying threats, and intelligence operatives asking questions no one dared to answer. The first real challenge came sooner than he expected. The neutral coalition station had allowed them temporary shelter, but only as long as the Imperium did not demand extradition. That window was closing. Station security announced a delegation from the Veiler Imperium, arriving under heavily armed escort. Elias prepared for confrontation. Elira gathered the other daughters, instructing them quietly in gestures and subtle movements he did not yet understand. They were not soldiers, but they were trained for influence, observation, and survival. When the delegation arrived, the station's central chamber was tense. The Veiler envoys, perfectly uniform and cold-eyed, presented their demand formally. Return the wards immediately, the lead envoy said. His voice was a mechanical echo, authoritative and calm. Failure to comply will be considered a hostile act against the Veiler Imperium. Elias stepped forward. They are not wards, they were enslaved. You cannot claim ownership over what was taken from them. The envoy's eyes narrowed. They are citizens of the Veiler. Their safety is the responsibility of the Imperium. You are obstructing lawful protection. Elira moved beside Elias. Her presence changed the room. I speak for myself, she said. I was held against my will. I choose to remain with humans until my safety is assured. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The other daughters added their voices, declaring the same choice. For the first time, the delegation realized that no threat or order would compel them. The envoy leaned forward. You are making a grave mistake. The Imperium is patient, but it is not forgiving. You will be forced to comply. Elias held his ground. We are patient too, but we will not be cowed. You have to see that freedom cannot be undone by threat or decree. The room was silent except for the faint hum of station machinery. The Imperium representatives were calculating, but something had shifted. They had assumed compliance. They had assumed fear. They had not assumed choice. Days passed and tensions escalated. The coalition station provided temporary protection, but word spread and more eyes turned toward humanity. Other species, long oppressed by larger powers, began reaching out to Elias, offering aid, intelligence, and shelter. Humans were no longer insignificant. Even small acts could resonate across star systems. Elias realized something remarkable. Humanity's greatest strength was not fleet size or firepower. It was the willingness to act morally, even in the face of danger. Other empires had relied on obedience, hierarchy, and fear. Humans relied on something older, something the galaxy had forgotten, courage to do what was right. But courage invited retaliation. One night, while Elias slept lightly in the bridge, alarms blared. The Wayfarer shook with the tremor of approaching ships. Surveillance showed a fleet of Valor strike vessels emerging from the far side of the system. They had calculated every movement, timed every jump, and they were ready to act. Elias woke Elira and the others immediately. "They're here," he said. "We need to move." Elira's expression did not waver. "Then we move together." They boarded the Wayfarer, engines primed. Elias initiated a rapid departure sequence, hoping the old ship could outmaneuver the faster Valor ships. The chase was brutal. Energy blasts flared against the hull. Shields flickered. The Wayfarer groaned under strain, but Elias' hands were steady, guiding the ship through asteroid fields and plasma storms that would have destroyed larger vessels. The daughters helped too. They coordinated on navigation, monitoring sensors, and calculating escape trajectories. They were not soldiers, but they were brilliant, disciplined, and unafraid. Elias watched them, feeling both pride and awe. Humans were not alone in ingenuity. But he knew the difference. The daughters chose freedom, just as humanity had always chosen courage over complacency. The Valor ships closed in. Elias made a sudden maneuver, diving into a dense field of ionized gas near a dying star. The Wayfarer shuddered, and for a moment it seemed impossible they would survive. Yet they did. Sensors recalibrated, all ships still active. The Valor had been cautious. They did not follow fully into the dangerous field. Humans survived where others feared to tread. Elira turned to Elias. "Your species has strange habits," she said with a faint smile. "You risk everything without guarantee simply because it is right." Elias laughed softly. "Sometimes right is all you have." The escape was a turning point. The Valor realized they could not easily recapture the daughters without massive risk. Neutral observers took note of human tactics, improvisation, determination, and moral resolve. Humanity, small and underestimated, had shown it could stand against one of the oldest powers in the galaxy and survive. Weeks passed in constant motion. Elias coordinated with allies, dodging patrols, repairing systems, and ensuring the daughters' safety. He learned more about them every day, their intelligence, compassion, and resilience. Elira and her sisters were more than symbols. They were leaders, thinkers, and survivors, and they began to change the daughters' own perspective on the galaxy. They saw humans not as weak, unruly creatures, but as unpredictable forces capable of reshaping events. They began to respect choice over decree, action over hierarchy, courage over fear. Finally, a message arrived that none expected. It was not a threat, not a demand. It was a signal from the Valor Queen herself. The content was simple yet heavy with implication. "Return my daughters or face consequences." Elias read the message aloud. "She knows." Elira's expression was calm. "Yes, she knows we are alive. And she knows the galaxy has seen it too." "Then what now?" Elias asked. "Now," Elira said, "we decide, we no longer hide, we no longer flee, we face the choice openly. Humanity has shown courage, now we must show it too." Elias realized the truth. This was no longer just a rescue mission. It was a turning point for the entire galaxy. The daughters' choice to remain free and Elias' decision to defend them had created a ripple that no empire could ignore. The Valor had power. Humans had courage. And sometimes courage was more dangerous than fleets, weapons, or politics. It was unpredictable, relentless, and unyielding. As the stars stretched before them, Elias knew the coming days would demand everything: intelligence, strategy, and strength. But he also knew something else. Humans did not run from the impossible. They did not bow before threats. And when the galaxy tested them, they would meet it, full force, with heart, mind, and unshakable resolve. The daughters looked at Elias, their eyes reflecting the light of distant suns. They had seen oppression, cruelty, and the cold designs of empires, but now they had also seen choice, freedom, and courage. Together with humanity, they would confront the Imperium, not as fugitives, but as symbols of something far larger. Elias whispered almost to himself, "They don't know it yet, but the galaxy has already changed." And somewhere deep in the reaches of space, the Valar Queen realized the truth. She was no longer fully in control. Humanity's defiance had begun a chain reaction, one that would not end until the galaxy had learned a simple, powerful lesson. Courage, freedom, and the refusal to bow, even in the face of overwhelming power, could be more powerful than any throne. And humanity, with all its flaws and unpredictability, had just begun to teach it. Elias Ward sat in the cockpit of the Wayfarer, staring at the holographic display showing the approaching fleet of Valar ships. This was it. The final confrontation was inevitable. Every jump, every narrow escape, every act of courage had led to this moment. The daughters of the Valar Queen, once hidden and enslaved, now sat beside him, calm but ready. The galaxy was watching, and nothing could be hidden any longer. Elira stood, her silver markings glowing faintly. "We do not hide anymore," she said. "The choice is ours, and we must face the consequences." Elias nodded. "Then we face them together." The Valar fleet loomed ahead, sleek and deadly, its weapons powered and aimed. The flagship, massive and dark, projected authority with every pulse of energy along its hull. Elias adjusted the controls. There would be no running. If he tried, the daughters could be captured, or worse. If he fought, they risked everything. "Listen," Elias said, turning to the girls. "We don't have to fight to survive, but we do have to be smart. Watch for patterns, watch for openings. Our strength is not firepower, it's unpredictability and choice." Elira smiled faintly. "Then we act wisely, not recklessly." The flagship hailed. Its voice echoed through the cabin, crisp and cold. "Human vessel, you are warned. Surrender the daughters, or all will be destroyed." Elias replied steadily, "You have already seen that we will not surrender. You cannot force freedom where it exists." "Freedom is irrelevant. They belong to the throne." "They belong to themselves," Elira said, stepping forward. Her sisters nodded. Together, their voices filled the bridge. "We choose to live free under no master." The Valar paused. Silence stretched across the void. The daughters' words had weight. They were heirs, yes, but also witnesses to cruelty. They were powerful in ways the fleet had not anticipated. Then Elias acted. He activated a wideband transmission, sending a live feed of the Wayfarer, its crew, and the daughters' declarations to every neutral station, independent fleet, and coalition outpost in the sector. The broadcast showed the Valar's attempts to intimidate them, the daughters' calm resolve, and Elias' statement. "Humanity defends what is right. We do not bow to tyranny." Across countless systems, screens lit up. Ships slowed, captains watched, diplomats recorded, and governments took note. The Imperium's threat was no longer private, it was public. The balance of power had shifted, not through battle, but through courage, truth, and transparency. The flagship opened fire. Energy beams streaked toward the Wayfarer, but Elias had anticipated this. He dove into a nearby asteroid field, using the terrain as cover. The Valar ships were fast and deadly, but predictability made them vulnerable. The smaller, human-built Wayfarer twisted through gaps too narrow for the larger ships, striking at weak points and evading attack. The daughters helped. They coordinated sensor readings, pointing out patrol patterns, gaps in shields, and potential escape routes. Their education and training became invaluable, not in violence but in understanding the battlefield. They were not soldiers, but they were thinkers, strategists, and problem solvers. Elias looked at Elira. "We're not just surviving. We're showing them that freedom cannot be fought with weapons alone." She nodded. "And that courage matters more than obedience." The chase reached the edge of a massive nebula, a swirling field of plasma and charged particles. It was dangerous. Any miscalculation could destroy the ships. But Elias knew the Imperium ships would hesitate to follow. Their sensors could fail, their weapons could misfire, and in that hesitation lay opportunity. The Wayfarer dove into the nebula. Shields flickered under the stress, hull plates groaned, and alarms screamed. The daughters worked tirelessly, monitoring the energy spikes and helping Elias guide the ship. The Valor ships followed cautiously, but their fear of the nebula slowed them. Inside the Wayfarer, the atmosphere was tense. Sweat beaded on Elias' brow. Every calculation mattered. One wrong move could end everything. But the daughters remained calm, steady, and focused. Each of them had endured hardship, yet none wavered. As they emerged from the far side of the nebula, the Valor flagship hesitated. Behind them, coalition and neutral forces began to appear. Word of the broadcast had spread. Observers arrived to witness the Imperium's response. The Valor fleet could no longer act freely without risking political disaster. Elira stepped forward. "They see us," she said, "and the galaxy is watching. We are no longer alone." Elias' chest tightened. The realization sank in. Humanity and the daughters had turned a personal rescue into a universal declaration. They had exposed the Imperium's cruelty and reminded everyone that even the smallest, most underestimated beings could resist tyranny. The flagship hailed once more. The envoy's voice was tight with frustration. "Human vessel, return the daughters. The Imperium will not forget this. You have defied the throne." Elias replied calmly, "The Imperium will remember that freedom exists and that courage is stronger than fear. The daughters are safe. That cannot be undone." There was silence. Then, unexpectedly, the envoy's tone softened. "You have made your point, human. For now, the daughters will remain free, but the Imperium does not forgive lightly." Elias exhaled. "We understand. And we will continue to act justly." The daughters smiled faintly. For the first time since their escape, they allowed themselves relief. They had faced the Empire and survived. They had chosen their own path. They had been freed, not just from chains, but from fear. Over the following weeks, the Wayfarer traveled through neutral space, delivering messages of hope, freedom, and courage. The daughters spoke publicly about their experiences, about slavery, and about the importance of choice. They became symbols, not of rebellion, but of integrity. Humanity's actions had amplified their voices, making their story resonate across countless systems. Elias watched quietly, proud but wary. Freedom always carried responsibility. Their actions would inspire others, but it would also invite challenges. Yet he knew one thing for certain. Humanity had proven that courage, morality, and ingenuity could change the course of events, even against empires older and stronger than themselves. One evening, the daughters gathered on the deck looking out at the stars. Elira's hand brushed against Elias' shoulder. "You were right," she said softly. "Courage is stronger than obedience, and choice matters more than decree." Elias smiled faintly. "It always has. It always will." They continued their journey together, not as fugitives, but as pioneers of a new principle in the galaxy. That freedom was universal, and that even the smallest act of courage could ripple across the stars. Far away in her crystal tower, the Valor Queen sat silently. She had lost the immediate power to dictate outcomes. Her daughters were alive, free, and speaking truth to countless worlds. The Imperium could no longer hide its cruelty, nor could it act without scrutiny. The galaxy was changing, and she understood power alone would no longer suffice. Elias and the daughters became symbols not through violence, but through moral action. Humanity had not just rescued the girls. It had reminded the galaxy that courage, intelligence, and integrity could defy fear, break chains, and change destinies. As the stars stretched endlessly before them, Elias realized the truth of what they had accomplished. They had not merely survived. They had altered the rules of engagement, rewritten expectations, and inspired hope. And somewhere deep in the void, countless worlds began to wonder, if humanity could do this, what else could they achieve? For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt a tremor, not of weapons, not of war, but of courage. And Elias Ward quietly smiled at the possibilities. The story was over, but the change had only begun. Humanity had shown the galaxy its greatest power: the refusal to bow, the willingness to act, and the courage to do what was right, no matter the cost. Freedom, it seemed, could not be chained, not by empires, not by threats, not even by the weight of centuries. And with allies like the Daughters of the Valor, humanity's influence had only just begun to stretch across the stars. The stars ahead were endless, but for the first time, Elias felt certain. Whatever came next, humanity and the galaxy would face it together.